Okay, welcome to Practices of Network and System Administration, Chapter 8. So Chapter 8 is all about operating system install strategies, page 137. And so they talk about how, you go through the process of installing the operating system and doing the configuration. And clearly this is something that kind of lends itself to automation. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel. People have been doing this for years. Automating the install of the operating system, this has been done. No need to reinvent the wheel. Incredibly easy for you to automate this step. So they go on to talk about, they surveyed a bunch of people and they talked about, the low performing organizations. You have an IT department with maybe one or two people. And if they're struggling, two things that popped up in their analysis. One is they didn't have an OS install strategy. They apparently just took whatever heck came from the vendor, and that was good enough. And then they were always complaining that they were overworked. Well, the two are kind of related. If you can automate those simple tasks, those things are just screaming that they should be automated. Things are so easy to automate. Well, then, by God, yeah, you're going to be spending an awful lot of time doing mundane work. If you automate them, you have more time. Okay. So the next they talk about consistency, and consistency is actually better than having things perfect. Perfect is kind of complex because perfect is never attainable, really. And so they talk about the tale of two coffee shops. One coffee shop makes pretty doggone good coffee, but some days you go there and it's really good, and some days you go there and it's not so good, and there's no real way to know whether or not it's going to be good or not. I mean, if it's good, you probably don't add anything to it. But if it's a bad cup of coffee, you go, oh man, well, let me add some cream here, or maybe add some sugar to it. But you never really know. Now, the other coffee shop across town is very consistent. Their coffee is always hot. It's always exactly the same. And in fact, it's so consistent that you don't even have to taste it first before you add sugar or cream or whatever you want, because it's always going to be absolutely the same every single time. So which do customers prefer? Do they prefer the concept where it's a crapshoot and sometimes you get really good coffee and sometimes you get really bad? Or do you prefer consistency? Well, consistency wins out most of the time. So if you do a manual install, let's say you grab a machine, replace a hard drive or something, and you say, okay, let me go get the installed disk, put the CD-ROM in the disk. By the way, hardly any computers now come with CD-ROMs in them, but that's not the point. Pop in a CD-ROM, hit the button, do the install. If you manually install, you are going to get inconsistencies because you're just not always going to do it the exact same way. So one more time, what's more important, to have it perfect or to have it consistent? Yeah, okay. So consistency makes your team appear very professional, even if you have to go back and add sugar and cream, using the coffee analogy. Even if you have to go back and say, okay, now you get this extra piece of software. But having that base starts with, that is perfect. So people don't like change, okay? So having consistency is very helpful. It makes your organization look professional, that every single PC coming out of the shop is absolutely identically configured. Okay, they talk about the Bell Labs story on page 139. I kind of like this. This is the early days of Windows, and Bell Labs were doing manual installs. And they spent like 25% of their time going around fixing things that didn't get installed correctly, device drivers, that kind of stuff. And it was an awful lot of lost productivity when you gave somebody a brand new machine. So maybe like the first 2 days, they didn't get any productive work done because all they were doing was, trying to get my dang printer to come up. How come I can't do this? And, an awful lot of frustration. So they said, well, we only have 2 technicians that are doing this. And they said, oh, well, ours are absolutely identical to each other. I mean, the ones that I do are identical to the one that Bob does. So they sat down and asked, okay, Bob, what are you doing? And they made out a list of things, and it was like, wow, I didn't know you were doing that. I didn't know you disabled that feature, and I didn't know you enabled this feature over there. And so they were very, very inconsistent. If you automate the process, though, then it's like an assembly line. A new machine comes in, or replace a hard drive, whatever it is, you push a button, and presto changeo, it gets absolutely identical setup every single time. There's a cute little quote here I kind of like. It says, perfection is unachievable, because it is undefined. Well, I like that. So consistency is better than perfection. That's kind of the point here. And then there was this really good other one. I really love this one. I've heard this one before on page 140. Siegel's Law. It says, if a man with a watch knows what time it is, but a man with 2 watches is never absolutely sure. I mean, if you get 2 different times, it's like, well, I don't know. Okay, so if you only have one standard and everyone gets the exact same thing, then there's no confusion. Okay. So they talk about the ultimate goal in their scenario is even to the point where they would allow self-service OS install. Personally, I'm a little leery of that. I'm not sure I want to do that. It really kind of depends on the organization. If you had a very mature organization about which are, developers or engineers, somebody who is technically, proficient, then maybe okay. But, people in the accounting department, no, I'm not going to do that. Anyway, so they talk about, the ultimate goal of automation is make it so simple that you could, go to some web portal and hit a button and presto changeo, you could, re-image your own machine. Okay. On page 141, they start talking about this little thing called the friction-free laptop reinstall. Great little article. You need to read that. Basically, they have a configuration database that talks about, this is the laptop. Here's what gets installed. They keep all their user data on a separate hard drive. For example, let's say you have a drive C for the operating system and a drive D or E or whatever it would be is for your user profiles. That's where all your files get stored. Okay, and you don't have to. It's just configured that way. You don't have to do anything. Just whenever you build a new account, they automatically go to this new drive, and so all the user data is stored there. Plus, they have network drives, so maybe they do some sort of replication and stuff. Then they use this thing. Well, we are going to be talking about this when we get to Active Directory. Thing called roaming profiles, and roaming profiles basically mean that my data gets stored up on the server, and so me, if I write a letter to the president and I store it in my documents, and then I go to some other computer, it will actually replicate all that stuff down. It might take a couple seconds, but when I log into somebody else's computer, I get all of my documents that are stored on my computer. Roaming profiles is really cool. And then when a drive dies, let's just say, for example, it was the operating system drive, the C drive that failed. Okay, just re-image the C drive, and in theory, you won't lose any of the user's data. Okay? Now, if you lost the other drive, the D or E or whatever drive letter it was, then it's going to have to do this replication thing over again. It might take a while, but on the other hand, while you're waiting for it to replicate all that stuff, well, you could just go to some other machine and work, right? Because of the roaming profiles. And, it might take a while, but when you're finally done, you go back. And so when your hard drive dies on your laptop, or your laptop gets stolen, or whatever the scenario is, and you got issued a brand new laptop, it's practically painless to do this. You get to reinstall the operating system, copy down all of your files, everything, and your laptop is back up and running in no time. And it did not take any supervision. It's one of those fire and forget kind of things. Push a button and walk away. That's how you gain productivity, is push a button and walk away and go do something else. All you need is a little ding, like your toaster oven does when it says that the toast is done. Something to let you know that the system is finished. Okay, that's all you really need. Okay, on page 142, they talk about the strategies. Well, there's basically 3 ways you can do this. Automation, which is obviously the big boy way of doing it. This is where professional organizations set up some sort of a system. Cloning, which is kind of sort of the same thing, except it's just done manually. Back in the old days, we did cloning for a while before we had other opportunities that were made available to us. We used Norton Ghost, and we created a ghost image, and so we got brand new machines that were coming in. We lined them all up and plugged them in with a lap link cable. Ooh, back in the day, and we copied. We cloned the machine, and we had one machine in the lab, which was our clone master. And then whenever we made tweaks to it, it was like, okay, the next time we get a brand new machine, then we'll get this updated image. So it kind of worked. And then, of course, the manual scenario, where you just stick in the install media and you do your thing. Okay, so let's talk about automation. So there's lots of things that Microsoft has in its toolbox. One is the Microsoft Deployment Toolkit. It's an entire system designed for you to grab image, manage images, and do these kinds of things. There's some others, more modern versions of this, but just bear with me. So booting from the network, that's a critical feature. Almost all commercial grade PCs, when you buy not a home-based PC from Dell, but if you buy one of the business-made ones, then out of the box, this thing is designed to, you plug in the network card and the power card, hit the button, and it will boot up off of the network. Okay, now obviously you got to do some stuff to do that. Anyway, this is called the Pre-Boot Execution Environment, PXE, P-X-E. So PXE has an awful lot of moving parts. You have to basically have a DHCP server, and if you've never heard these terms, don't worry about it. We are going to get to that. It's got to have a TFTP server, a trivial file transfer protocol. Again, if you've never heard it, don't worry about it. And so what this allows is for the system to boot up and then run something. It can say, oh, I just woke up. I have amnesia. I have no idea what's going on. But I'm going to go to the network, and the network's going to say, aha, I see you're a brand new machine. Here's your IP address, and here's where you go to get your boot image, and then it boots that thing up. Okay, and booting up into this thing is called WinPE, Windows Pre-Execution Environment. WinPE is typically the thing that gets booted. It's like a miniature version of Windows, okay? And then from there, you could have, write an application or have somebody else do it for you that goes and grabs and does all the things that's supposed to happen. So WinPE is kind of cool because let me give you another example of using PXE Boot and WinPE. So I use a system called Acronis for doing image style backups of my machines here at the house. So, I have a thumb drive, and I stick it in there, and I say, okay, it's time to do a restore. So let's say my machine, lost all of its hard drives, and it's completely toast. But I've done backups periodically. So I go grab me a brand new hard drive, got nothing on it. I put it in my machine, button it up. I boot up off this special media that came with the system. Acronis allows you to make this media. You stuck in a USB flash drive, and it makes this thing for you. And so it boots up, and it uses PXE Boot to kind of get it started. It uses WinPE as its operating system, and then it launches the restore application from Acronis, and then you point to where your thing is. It could be across the network because all the network drivers are there, or it could be like on a USB hard drive. And you hit the button and say restore, and one more time, you push the button and you walk away. There's nothing else to do once you get it started. Okay, so that is PXE Boot and WinPE. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of doing this? Well, the pros are, one image to rule them all. Basically, you fixed it so that whatever image you produced is going to be consistently added to every single machine. Now, the downside is, okay, let's say you had a remote office somewhere, and they had a 256K baud, leased line scenario. That would be really bad, pushing images across that small link. So, this really only works when you have high bandwidth. That's the only real downside to this automation system is, it pushes the entire image across the network. And the image could get kind of big, right? I mean, if you have Windows 10 plus Office plus, whatever you need, then that. So, let me give you one more thing. So you could have multiple flavors. You could have this base, and then the accounting department would have an add-on that would add their stuff, and the engineering department would have an add-on that adds their stuff, that kind of stuff. So when the machine wakes up, all you basically need to tell it is, what flavor are you? Oh, you're an accounting machine. And he goes, oh, okay. And he gets the base, and then the base takes it from there, and you add the add-on. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark. You guys know how this works.